But there's a lot of businesses that are asking their people to return back to work. And we do not force people to come back to work. And we basically said, we want to focus on outcomes.
Today on Time We Discuss, I have Shanil Ebrahim with me. Shanil, thank you for joining me today.
Glad to be on here, Dan.
You're with Deloitte International. Tell us, what's your day typically like working for such a large organization?
A little bit about my role is I'm a partner at Deloitte and lead our life science and healthcare consulting business. And globally, we're about 400,000 people, and in Canada, it's 14,000 people. And in my day-to-day, I get to steer the ship for our life sciences and healthcare consulting group. It's a fantastic team of around 1,000 practitioners where we get to cover a wide range of areas, from working on complex strategies with organizations like redesigning the healthcare system, to streamlining operations, to implementing AI, digital and health solutions that are really cutting edge and that improves patient care, to right now, a big focus of ours is around the human capital business, where we work with organizations to prepare for the workforce of the future. A lot of the work that we do is purpose driven. So that's my day-to-day, I would say, to make the lives of our citizens better and strengthen our society.
Being at the level that you are, what are your hours typically like? Are you pulling like 60-hour work weeks, 40-hour work weeks, 80-hour work? What's that like, being that high up in such a large organization?
One of the reputation that consulting tends to have is around extremely long work hours, and I would say that has been changing and continues to change over the course of the last decade, right? Where even when I ended up joining the organization, typically having 60 to 70 to 80-hour work weeks, it can be quite typical, and that's because of the client work that we end up focusing on. Clients don't pay us to do work that they could do at the pace that they would do it. They end up expecting complex work to be done at a very fast pace, which is one of the reasons that they're actually paying the big dollars for consultants. But this also allows us to flex pretty hard just in terms of the work that we end up doing, to be able to, achieve that pace. Now, things have changed over the course of the last few years, where there has been a heightened focus on well-being. We do strongly believe, where research does back it up, that the more we focus on the well-being, the more impactful and the more the better the outcomes that we actually achieve from our work. So right now, we end up focusing on value much more, where we're focused on the type of projects that provide us the greatest value, that doesn't end up blowing our brains out in terms of the hours that we end up working. So you can expect, there's some projects that you can end up even having, 40, 50 hours work week, and some, more stressful projects could end up being 50 to 60. But we do everything in our path to ensure that we're actually able to elevate the outcomes for our employees, because employees are our resources at the end of the day. It's not all about products and assets and all of that. Our currency is going to be our people, and we want to make sure we're taking care of our people who can actually better serve our clients.
So what are some things that you're doing that kind of speak to that? Some actual tangible things that you're doing to take care of your people, make sure they're at a nice, strong mental health, that they're being the best that they can be. What are some things that you're doing at your organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think there's a few things, right? And I'm going to focus on, 2 to 3 specifically. The first one is just at a project level. For every single project that we end up taking on, we have a project pledge, which means right at the start of every single project, we talk about what's important for people, what are the non-negotiables. This is where we understand things like religion, family, extracurricular activities that they're involved in, and what it really means to them, and also their style of working as well. When do they work their best? What are the modes and channels that they end up working best? Do they like working in the evenings? Do they like working in the mornings? And based on the pledge that we end up making at the end of the day, which is based on the different individuals and styles, how do we ensure that we work together collectively to achieve the outcome, so that we're focused much, much more on outcomes? And it has worked wonders because this allows that flexibility and ensures that everyone's voice is actually heard, and every project ends up being flexible and agile based on the different personalities and the different working styles of people. So that's, one, really big thing that we end up doing. Second is just around our hybrid work style. So obviously, as a result of the pandemic, everyone has gone hybrid in some ways, some form, but there's a lot of businesses that are asking their people to return back to work. Some have gone 3 days, some have gone 4 days back into work, and that's like a must be in person and requirement. Deloitte is still optional. We do not force people to come back to work, and we basically said we want to focus on outcomes. And wherever you feel best to work from, and we suggest that it be hybrid, that you're not working exclusively in person and not exclusively virtual, we want to make sure that it's actually flexible. And that's worked so well that if you come into our office on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, those tend to be our more packed days, it's actually even hard to find a seat because people cherish being in the office to connect with each other and know very well that they can end up coming and going as they please, as long as the outcomes are actually achieved. So that's like a second big one. A third big one is what we call our TVP. So this is our talent value proposition. This is where we think about how we're providing compensation and benefits to our individuals. So our compensation is extremely competitive based on the market as well, and we end up, compensating our individuals quite well based on their level, their skill sets, and the capabilities that they bring to the table. But it's our benefits that I'm extremely proud of, especially in areas where people really need a lot of support, mental health being one of them. So right now, our mental health support has increased quite a bit in terms of dollars. Back in the day when I joined, it was $300 a person, which at that time was actually quite competitive. Now it's $4,000 a person, and each family member it can get access to it. So if you have 4 individuals in your family, it's 16,000 people, $16,000 that is provided to that family for any sort of mental health support should you seek it. And that provides, a great level of comfort to know that there's access to those type of resources should they have it as well. So those are like the 3 things that just came to mind, as you asked the question. I'm sure there's many more that will come to my mind, but those are the 3 ones I wanted to highlight.
That's awesome. And I love and I forget what you call it, but the idea where your employees essentially get to decide, where they're going to be on a given day. I've actually heard of that before, and I think that's really, really cool. I think it's very forward thinking, taking that hybrid work to the next level. I think that is really, really neat. So I don't know if you would know this or not. Are any other organizations looking at Deloitte and looking at what you're doing from this perspective and saying they're doing something right? We're going to try to mirror that. Do you know, are any other corporations or organizations doing things like that from looking at you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this stat actually, is quite fresh in our head because it just recently came out that we were ranked number 3 from the top places to work in Canada. And that's something that we're proud of. And we've always been in the top 10 globally as well. And this is just a benchmark just in terms of how our people feel about being at Deloitte. And when we think about organizations, for sure, professional services firms and consulting firms look at Deloitte as currently the number 1 organization just in terms of workplace and well-being, as well as a lot of our clients end up asking us for counsel and advice just in terms of how we are taking care of our employees, whether it's mental health days, whether it's wellness programs, how we're actually achieving work-life balance. And we use examples from our own organization in terms of how we've actually integrated this into our daily work as well. And a lot of that has been redefined as a result of the pandemic. And right now, other companies have definitely taken notice of how effective these policies have been. And a lot of our clients are looking to adopt similar strategies as well. And this is across the landscape, including whether it's the healthcare industry or consumer industry, an energy resources industry or a financial services institution. They're all looking in terms of how we've actually done it across the board as well.
Going back to your role at your organization, someone of your caliber, is it kind of expected that you will also join other external boards or external groups, like community organizations? Is there any kind of expectation when someone reaches a level like yours, or that expectation isn't necessarily there?
The expectation is not necessarily there to join, different boards or anything. What Deloitte expects any person who's within the organization is to live out a similar mission and a similar purpose, which is how we end up actually hiring different individuals. And our purpose and our mission is to, make the lives of our citizens better. And our work is rooted in strengthening our society and economy. And we do that by partnering or serving a lot of the healthcare organizations. Sorry, not just healthcare organizations, obviously broader organizations, but in my role with healthcare organizations to solve some of the most challenging and pressing problems. And as part of our role, we would be serving organizations in our professional capacity and also in our personal capacity. And I'm very privileged to be able to wear different hats and being able to serve on boards, because I feel being on boards kind of strengthens my view and provides me a different perspective in terms of what's happening at a community basis, and vice versa. Everything that I end up basically doing at a community level allows me to better serve my clients who are in the healthcare domain as well. So I think it is one where the synergies actually apply quite strongly, and it's something that I urge to a lot of, fellow peers and leaders.
So let's talk about how you got into your role. Very briefly, I don't know how extensive your history is, but guide us through that. How did you start and then kind of get to where you are? How did that all transpire?
I was a clinical epidemiologist and a researcher in the hospital sector. And, I really don't want to sound immodest, but I was a fairly successful one. And it was deeply fulfilling, where I was able to dive into the most complex patient care issues, whether it's mental health or seniors care or children with disabilities. And you can truly imagine the ethical dilemmas that I was serving at a daily basis. But there was a period, especially in the U.S., because I spent some time in the Bay Area, specifically in Silicon Valley, and where I noticed that the research community and the business corporate world were tightly linked, and I started feeling this itch. When you have this feeling that you wanted to shake things up a bit, and I felt like there was a potential to make an impact by kind of coupling some of the business opportunities that I ended up seeing specifically in healthcare. So I didn't want to make a big shift right off the bat. I ended up doing independent consulting with some startups and insurance companies, and loved the hands-on aspect and direct impact I was making, because a lot of the work that I was doing was, how do I provide advice and guidance and doing projects in helping patients get better interventions at the right point in time, so that they can get off disability benefits and safely return back to work. And I was constantly asking myself, how can I extend my impact beyond just this organization or this client that I was working with? How can I influence healthcare systems or large organizations, whether they're public companies or they are private organizations like specialty pharmacies or pharmaceutical companies? And that's where consulting firms like the Deloittes, the McKinseys, the BCGs of the world caught my eye, because they were directly working with the executives of these large organizations around these complex problems where they can make a big impact as well. And to me, the large consulting firm seemed like the perfect avenue to take everything I've learned and magnify the impact across multiple organizations. And the pace and the variety of consulting also was incredibly appealing, because it provides the exposure. It fit my style, just in terms of how I work, from meeting new challenges head on, working with diverse teams, and just every project could be its own puzzle as well. So it was through different connections and that I've had in the industry that I had a connection with Deloitte, and one thing led to another where they brought me on to launch the health analytics business for them. And yeah, the rest is history. I went from health analytics to broader health consulting, and now I'm privileged to be in the position that I'm in, and very happy with how things have actually progressed since then.
Let's talk about your education briefly. I'm assuming that when you first start with the initial work you were doing, I forget what you said it was, but I'm assuming that was directly related to what you went to school for. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, that's right. So because I was a clinical epidemiologist, I did my PhD in clinical epidemiology at McMaster University in Canada.
When you were doing your schooling, did you go right from bachelor's to PhD? Did you take a break in between, or you just got your education out of the way right out of the gate?
No, I did both. So I did my bachelor's in psychology, and then I did start working as a bioethics associate as well as the clinical research associate. And then I ended up doing my master's in medical science and bioethics, loved it. But that's where I actually started finding about clinical epidemiology and using data to do clinical research. And what I did was I ended up joining a mental health hospital where I ran clinical trials for a lot of pharmaceutical drugs, and to understand the impact on depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, and was was fascinated by kind of the work that I was doing, and I wanted to take it to another scale, which is where I ended up doing a PhD in clinical epidemiology, and that's how it all kind of connected with each other.
Understandably so, the education that you received was directly related to what you were doing at that point in time. How important or how much does it relate to what you're actually doing now? Do you think someone in your position needs to have a PhD to be in the role that they're in, or it just helps you kind of navigate the rivers to kind of get you where you are, but being where you are and doing what you're doing, you don't necessarily need it?
Yeah, I think there's a difference between a requirement versus what's beneficial. So a requirement, absolutely not. You do not need, a PhD or a master's to be in consulting. We take people right out of their bachelor, and they end up being, an analyst and a consultant, senior consultant. They can grow up within the organization as well, right? And some of them don't even need healthcare expertise by any means. We end up having people, coming from a general degree, and we end up training them up, right? So definitely not a requirement. In terms of it being beneficial, of course. Anytime you end up having some sort of domain or subject matter expertise and coming into consulting, you're able to couple that with your consulting foundational skills and be able to thrive with that as well. And you see, different backgrounds of people actually coming in. So when I actually came in, I found it extremely beneficial that I was a clinical epidemiologist, I've been a bioethicist, I've been a researcher, and I feel that to really do well in any sort of career, having a different lens and perspective across a multitude of different areas just helps to get a better vantage point and allow you to solve problems. And we're in a problem solving business, so it definitely helped me quite a bit. But organically, you can also build these type of skills if you come ground up from an analyst. Irrespective of any level that you're at, continuous learning is extremely important, which means you're always sensing the market and landscape. And what I mean by that is you're always trying to get knowledge in different ways. Some of that could be research and reading. I read a lot of books. I attend a lot of talks. I attend a lot of conferences. That's one way of getting in for information. Networking is another way. I meet with a lot of different thought leaders across the landscape, whether they're in healthcare or not, because a lot of times just having a dialogue, you're able to learn quite a bit just in terms of what's happening, how a person is actually thinking, what are the big players within a field. And the third one, I speak with clients directly. A lot of times when I speak with clients, it's not just about a project or their business. We're talking about general things that's happening in the landscape. What are the trends? What are the shifts? Where do we think the future is actually going? And that actually helps in terms of shaping my own mindset as well. And I'll actually add a fourth one in because I think this is going to be quite important. I always think one of the best ways of learning is by doing. and being involved in projects, opportunities, anything that you can immerse yourself and build some sort of skill, you're going to end up learning quite a bit just in terms of what's new, what works, what doesn't work. And that's just different ways of gaining that lens and experience to completely diversify your perspectives. I do think it's important for me to travel to be able to get those perspectives. I really do believe that there is a connection that you end up having in person that just by being able to grab a coffee or attending some of these conferences in person or these panels in person, you're able to get a level of immersion that's very difficult to get virtually. At the same time, I've young kids. I have a 4-year-old, I have a 7-year-old, and so I don't like to be away from home way too much. So I make things very in and out as much as possible, knowing very well that I'm making trade-offs. If I'm in and out, I'm not getting the level of immersion that I probably ideally would want. But then I'm not going to be able to immerse myself within my family environment if I'm always away as well. So it's a constant balancing act, but it's worked out really well. I'm very happy to say that, you know, things have been working extremely successfully on both sides of the coin. And I just need to continue to look at like how things are changing on both sides of the coin.
Before our call today, I was reading up on some of your information, and I saw that you are one of the 40 under 40 people. So I just want to say congratulations on that. That has to be a huge, huge accomplishment, obviously. What was it like getting that notification? What was that like?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. There's a few things that went through my mind. As soon as I got it, first was, I mean, there's a little bit of shock and a little bit and gratitude that comes in right off the bat. Shock in the sense that there's a lot of times that you're actually moving so quickly in your life that it makes certain things like this makes you pause. And it did help me fill me with a lot of gratitude just in terms of the support that I've had from my wife, my family, my friends, my peers, my colleagues, all these years, which was an accumulation of these different milestones that kind of led to that. That was one of the first things that went through my mind. The second thing that went through my mind was just a level of, I would say, humility, because I started reading up on a lot of other people who ended up receiving the awards, and it was a privilege, and it was humbling to be kind of in that group who has achieved quite a bit, and people that I would generally look up to in terms of what they have been able to achieve and the impact that they have made in Canada. The last one I would just say, just in terms of what kind of went through my mind, was just a moment of reflection around why am I doing what I'm doing. It's it does make you pause just in terms of what is your purpose and are you actually achieving what you want. And I do think that when I reflect back, I've made a lot of good choices just in terms of trying to improve the lives of individuals. And I want to make sure that anything that I do for, let's call it the next 40 years, is going to continue that trajectory. And what does that start to look like as well? So that's like a moment of reflection that kind of went through my head as well.
Shanil, that is awesome. In our fast-paced world, I feel like we're always on to the next thing. No matter what we're doing, our jobs, the media we're consuming, we're always on to the next thing. And I feel like it's so easy for people to fail to reflect on what they're doing, on why they're doing it. So I think that's really, really good point that you bring up there. Speaking with you reminded me of I spoke with Erica Silverman. She's an author, and she was nominated for a New York Times bestseller, and it was neat hearing her perspective on what it was like to be nominated for that. And one thing I do like to do when I'm speaking with someone, I like to give them the opportunity to talk about a project they're working on, a cause they believe in, more about their business. So if there's something specific you'd like to discuss, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much for that. During the height of the pandemic, I would say actually the tail end of the pandemic, I had the privilege of leading a project that was incredibly challenging and deeply rewarding, which was launching a innovative drug for a particular type of cancer. And I'm keeping it general just because there are some confidentiality just around what's exactly happening. But this is one of the drugs that could potentially cure this form of cancer, or at least at least keep it at remission for a very, very long time. And the privilege that I've also had was not just helping launch it, but this is a very expensive drug that's going to be in the market, and being able to provide access to patients is as important as putting the drug in the market in itself. So a lot of the work that I was doing with my team at Deloitte was, how do we ensure that this type of drug can be accessible to patients? So we created a platform where it was providing support services, automatic enrollment, easy tracking of where the drug is globally, so that they can end up actually accessing that much more readily. Travel support, hospital support that was actually provided as part of it. And all of this is actually brought together in one platform. Now, this has been something that we've been working on for quite a bit of time, and it's something that is going to be launched sometime early next year, where all of this is going to come together. So as you can imagine, coordinating with multiple stakeholders, whether it's government agencies, healthcare providers, logistic companies, tech firms, it was quite immense. And just given the scale and just the importance of the task, it was one of those where you knew the work that you were doing was truly purposeful, and it can make a tangible difference in people's lives. So that's one of the things that just thought I could share, just, that not only keeps me motivated, but I also know keeps a lot of my teams motivated in terms of the work that we do.
That is awesome. And cancer is such a strong thing, obviously. it touches so many people's lives. If not directly, you don't have to look very far to find someone that it's drastically affected their lives. So that's really cool to hear what you're saying. Shanil, it's been absolutely awesome having you on Time We Discuss and learning what it's like to be a consultant with Deloitte.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan. And, really appreciate you taking the time, and looking forward to having more conversations like this.